My name is Elizabeth, and the moment my sister told me to sit behind a marble pillar at her wedding, hidden from view like a shameful secret, I felt something inside me crack, not break, crack. Because what came next wasn't weakness. It was the beginning of the most calculated, devastating, and deeply satisfying reckoning of my life. Have you ever been invisible to the people who should see you most? Let me back up. Growing up, Claire was the golden child. Not just in our parents' eyes, but in everyone's. She had the perfect smile, the perfect grades, the perfect everything. I was 3 years younger, quieter, studious in a way that didn't win applause at dinner parties. Claire got the lead in school plays. I got library duty. Claire got a car for her 16th birthday. I got a used laptop for college. The pattern was set early. She shined, I supported. I told myself it didn't matter. I loved my sister. I believed she loved me too. When Claire got engaged to Marcus, a successful investment banker with family money and magazine cover looks, our parents practically glowed. The wedding planning consumed our family for 8 months. Everything had to be perfect. No expense spared, no detail overlooked. I helped with everything: vendor calls, dress fittings, seating charts, centerpiece selections. I took vacation days from my job as a data analyst to drive Claire to appointments. I stayed up until 2 in the morning addressing invitations in the calligraphy she insisted on. "You're the best, Lizzie," she'd say, squeezing my hand. "I couldn't do this without you." I believed her. 3 weeks before the wedding, Claire asked me to come over to discuss something important. I thought maybe she wanted me to give a speech or perhaps help coordinate the day of timeline. Instead, she sat me down in her pristine living room, everything white and minimalist like a magazine spread, and said the words that would change everything. "I need to talk to you about the wedding." Of course. "What's up?" She wouldn't meet my eyes. "Marcus and I have been thinking about the aesthetic, the photos, the visual flow of everything. And, well, we've decided it would be best if you sat somewhere less visible during the ceremony." I laughed. Actually laughed, because surely she was joking. "What do you mean less visible?" "There's a pillar in the venue. Marble. Very elegant. We thought you could sit just behind it. You'll still be able to see everything, but you won't be in the main sightlines for the photographer." The room felt like it was tilting. "You want me to sit behind a pillar? At your wedding?" "It's not personal, Lizzie. It's just Marcus's family is very image conscious. And you know how you are. You're beautiful in your own way, but you're not exactly photogenic. And with your weight and the way you dress, we just think it's better this way. For the overall look." Each word was a knife, precise, deliberate, lethal. "Claire, I'm your sister. Which is exactly why you should understand. This day is about me, about us, about perfection. I need you to do this one thing for me. Please." I should have walked out, should have refused, should have burned that bridge right there. But 26 years of conditioning, of being the supportive one, the understanding one, the one who made sacrifices, kept me in that chair. "Okay," I whispered. Her relief was immediate. "Thank you. I knew you'd understand. And hey, at least you'll have a great view of the ceremony." I left her apartment in a daze, drove home on autopilot, sat in my small studio and stared at the wall until dark. Then I did something I hadn't done in years. I opened a bottle of wine, pulled out my laptop, and started researching. Not about how to process emotional pain, not about sibling betrayal or family therapy. I researched Marcus because something about this whole situation felt wrong. Claire had always been self-centered, but this level of cruelty was new, and it had started around the time she got engaged. I remembered how she changed in those months. More secretive, more anxious, more controlling. How she'd stopped talking about Marcus in that dreamy, in-love way. How she'd started talking about the wedding as a production and investment. I was a data analyst. I knew how to find patterns, how to dig, how to connect dots others missed. I started with social media. Marcus's Instagram was predictably polished. yacht parties, business conferences, gym selfies, and countless photos with Claire looking like a trophy. But social media only tells you what people want you to see. I went deeper. Public records, court filings, business registrations, financial disclosures. It took me 2 weeks of late nights and obsessive searching, but I found it. 3 years ago, Marcus had been engaged before to a woman named Jennifer Hartley. The engagement ended abruptly, and 6 months later, Jennifer had filed a restraining order. The details were sealed, but the docket number was public. I found Jennifer through LinkedIn, sent her a carefully worded message explaining that I was concerned about my sister's safety, and asked if she'd be willing to talk. She called me that same night. I almost didn't respond, Jennifer said, her voice tight. I've spent 3 years trying to forget Marcus Sutherland exists. I understand, and I wouldn't have reached out if I wasn't worried. You should be worried. Marcus is a monster, a charming, calculating monster. For the next hour, Jennifer told me everything. How Marcus had been perfect at first, attentive, generous, romantic. How he'd gradually become controlling, monitoring her phone, isolating her from friends, criticizing her appearance. How the emotional abuse had escalated until she'd finally left. How he'd stalked her afterward, showing up at her work, her gym, her parents' house, until she'd gotten the restraining order. He's obsessed with image, Jennifer said. Everything is about how things look. His perfect life, his perfect career, his perfect wife. That's all your sister is to him, you know. An accessory. A photo opportunity. My blood ran cold. Did he ever hit me? No, he's too smart for that. But he destroyed me in other ways. Made me feel worthless, ugly, crazy. By the time I left, I didn't recognize myself. After we hung up, I sat in the dark for a long time. I thought about Claire's behavior, the way she'd become so focused on perfection, the way she'd asked me to hide at the wedding because I didn't fit Marcus's image. She was already under his control. She just didn't know it yet. I could have gone to her then, could have warned her, shown her the evidence, begged her to call off the wedding. But I knew Claire. She was proud, stubborn, so desperate for this fairy tale that she'd convinced herself to sacrifice her own sister for it. If I came to her with accusations about her perfect fiancé, she'd dismiss me, defend him, maybe cut me out of her life entirely. No, I needed a different approach. I needed leverage. I needed the truth to be undeniable. So I kept digging. I hired a private investigator, a woman named Sarah, who came highly recommended for handling sensitive cases. I gave her everything I'd found on Marcus and asked her to look deeper, to find anything that might be relevant. I spent $2,000 I didn't really have, money I'd been saving for a new car. It was worth every penny. Sarah found the offshore accounts. She found the questionable business dealings. She found evidence that Marcus had been systematically defrauding his employer. Small amounts, carefully hidden, but adding up to nearly $200,000 over 3 years. She found emails to other women, including one ongoing affair with a paralegal at his firm. And she found something else. Marcus had convinced Claire to put the wedding expenses on credit cards in her name, promising to pay them off after their honeymoon. He never intended to pay. He was planning to file for bankruptcy 6 months after the wedding, leaving Claire holding hundreds of thousands in debt, while his assets remained protected offshore. He wasn't marrying my sister. He was destroying her. Systematically, deliberately, perfectly. The wedding was in 4 days. I spent those days preparing. I compiled everything into a comprehensive dossier: financial records, communication logs, Jennifer's sworn statement, everything. I made copies. I consulted with a lawyer about the best way to present this information to ensure maximum legal impact. And I made a decision about the wedding. I was going to attend. I was going to sit behind that pillar, and I was going to wait for exactly the right moment. The wedding day arrived with crystalline weather. One of those perfect autumn mornings where everything looks touched by gold. The venue was spectacular, a historic estate with marble columns and manicured gardens. I arrived early, wearing the dress Claire had approved, a simple navy shift that made me as invisible as possible. Oh, good, you're here, Claire said when she saw me, already in her bridal suite with a team of stylists working on her hair and makeup. She looked stunning. She also looked terrified. Of course I'm here. I'm your sister. Something flickered in her eyes. Guilt, maybe, or doubt. But then Marcus's mother swept in with champagne, and the moment passed. I found my seat behind the pillar as directed. From where I sat, I could see the altar, but I'd be completely invisible in all the photos. Perfect for the perfect wedding. Other guests filed in. Marcus's society friends, our parents' colleagues, Claire's sorority sisters, everyone dressed impeccably, laughing and chatting, ready to witness a fairy tale. The ceremony started. Claire looked like a princess walking down the aisle. Marcus looked like a movie star waiting at the altar. The officiant began the traditional words. I waited. If anyone has reason why these two should not be joined in marriage, speak now or forever hold your peace. It's a ceremonial phrase. Nobody ever actually speaks. Except this time. I do. Every head turned. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Claire's face went white. Marcus's went red. I stood up from behind my pillar and walked down the aisle. In my hands was a folder. In my chest was a hammering heart. But my voice was steady. I have reason why this marriage should not proceed. Lizzie, what are you doing? Claire's voice was strangled. I stopped a few feet from the altar, looked at my sister, really looked at her. I'm saving your life. Then I turned to Marcus. Did you tell Claire about Jennifer Hartley? About the restraining order? About the pattern of abuse? His face transformed. The handsome mask slipped, revealing something cold and cruel underneath. You have no idea what you're talking about. This is insane. Security. Did you tell her about the $200,000 you embezzled from your firm? I continued, my voice carrying through the silent room. Or about the affair you're having with Amanda Price, or about how you've set up this entire wedding to destroy my sister financially while protecting your offshore assets. The room erupted. Marcus lunged toward me, but his groomsmen caught him. Claire stood frozen, her bouquet dropping to the floor. I handed the folder to the officiant. Everything is documented in here. Financial records, witness statements, communications. I've also provided copies to Claire's attorney, who's waiting outside, and to the FBI, who have an active investigation into Mr. Sutherland's financial crimes. That last part was a slight exaggeration. I'd contacted the FBI that morning, but they hadn't confirmed an investigation yet. But the threat was enough. Marcus's face went from red to ashen. This is slander. I'll sue you for everything. Please do, I said calmly. Discovery will be fascinating. Then I turned to Claire, my sister, who was staring at me with an expression I couldn't read. I'm sorry, I told her. I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner. I'm sorry I let it get this far. But I couldn't let you marry him. Not when I knew what he really was. You're lying, she whispered. You're jealous. You've always been jealous of me. It hurt. Even knowing everything I knew, it hurt. Read the folder, I said quietly. Read it all, and then decide if I'm lying. I walked back down the aisle, through the stunned crowd, out into the golden afternoon. I got in my car and drove home, shaking so hard I had to pull over twice. I didn't hear from Claire for 3 days. When she finally called, I almost didn't answer. But I picked up on the 4th ring. It's all true, she said. Her voice was hollow. Everything you said. Marcus confessed when his lawyer told him the evidence was irrefutable. The FBI arrested him this morning. His firm fired him yesterday. The offshore accounts, the affair, all of it. True. Claire? I put everything on credit cards in my name, Lizzie. The venue, the catering, the flowers, everything. $300,000. He said we'd pay it off together, that it was an investment in our future. I'm ruined. Completely ruined. I close my eyes. Come over. We'll figure it out. How can you even stand to talk to me after what I did to you? I asked you to hide at my wedding like you were something to be ashamed of. I chose him over you. I believed him when he said you weren't photogenic enough, that you'd ruin the aesthetic. What kind of monster does that? The kind who is being manipulated and controlled, I said gently. Claire, this wasn't your fault. It was my fault. I knew something was wrong. I felt it. But I was so desperate to have the perfect life, the perfect wedding, the perfect story. I ignored every red flag. And I hurt you. God, Lizzie, I'm so sorry. She was crying now, real broken sobs. Come over, I repeated. We'll figure it out together. She did. She showed up at my door an hour later, still in sweatpants, her face swollen from crying. I made tea. We sat on my couch, the one she'd once called tragically thrift store, and I pulled out my laptop. Okay, I said. Let's look at the damage. We spent the next 6 hours going through everything. The credit card debt was catastrophic, but not insurratable. I had connections through my work with financial analysts and bankruptcy attorneys. We found ways to negotiate with vendors, many of whom were horrified when they learned the situation and willing to reduce charges. We filed reports with the credit bureaus documenting the fraud. We contacted a victims advocacy group that specialized in financial abuse. It took months, but we dug Claire out. The FBI's investigation into Marcus led to asset seizure that helped repay some of Claire's debt. His family, desperate to avoid further scandal, quietly paid off another chunk. Claire moved back home with our parents, took a second job, and slowly rebuilt. And somewhere in that process, we rebuilt too. I don't deserve your help, she said one night. Months later, we were in my apartment again, going over the last of the payment plans. Yes, you do. You're my sister. I didn't treat you like a sister. I treated you like an inconvenience, something to hide. You were being abused. You weren't thinking clearly. That's not an excuse for what I did, for how I've always treated you. She looked at me, really looked at me, maybe for the first time in years. You've always been there, always supported me, always put me first, and I took it for granted. Worse, I resented you for it, because you were smarter than me, more capable, more real, and instead of celebrating that, I tried to make myself feel better by making you smaller. I didn't know what to say. I'm going to do better, Claire continued. I'm going to be the sister you deserve, starting now. And she did. Over the following year, I watched Claire transform. She went to therapy. She rebuilt her career, not in the glamorous marketing firm Marcus had pressured her to join, but in a nonprofit working with domestic abuse survivors. She started speaking openly about financial abuse and coercive control. She became an advocate, and she became my friend. Marcus went to prison for fraud and embezzlement. His sentence was 7 years. Jennifer Hartley reached out to thank me and ended up becoming a friend too. She and Claire even met once, two survivors finding solidarity in their shared experience. My parents apologized, tearfully, genuinely. They'd been so blinded by Marcus's money and status that they'd failed to see what he really was, failed to protect Claire, failed to value me. We took you for granted, my father said. We let the squeaky wheel get the grease, and we forgot that you were holding everything together. We're sorry, Elizabeth, truly sorry. It wasn't perfect. Families never are. But it was real, and that was better. A year and a half after the wedding that never was, Claire threw a party. Not a fancy society event, just a backyard gathering at our parents' house with close friends and family. There was a banner, celebrating freedom and second chances. Speech, someone called out. Claire stood up, glass in hand, and looked directly at me. Most of you know what happened. How my sister stood up at my wedding and stopped me from making the worst mistake of my life. How she saved me even after I'd treated her terribly. What you might not know is that she'd been trying to save me my whole life. From my own ego, my own shallow choices, my own worst instincts. And instead of thanking her, I'd spent years pushing her into the background. She walked over to where I was sitting. "Lizzie, I can never repay what you did, but I can promise to spend the rest of my life being the sister you've always deserved, the one who sees you, who celebrates you, who has your back the way you've always had mine." She raised her glass. "To Elizabeth, the strongest, bravest, most intelligent person I know, and my hero." Everyone drank. I tried not to cry and failed completely. Later, as the party wound down, Claire and I sat together on the porch steps, watching fireflies emerge in the dusk. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked. "Standing up like that? Causing such a scene?" I thought about it. About that moment in the ceremony when I'd stepped out from behind the pillar, when I'd chosen truth over comfort, action over silence. "No," I said, not for a second. Even though everyone saw, even though it was so public and dramatic, especially because of that, some truths need to be spoken out loud. Some injustices can't be fixed quietly. And some people, I bumped her shoulder with mine, are worth fighting for even when they can't see it themselves. Claire leaned her head on my shoulder. "When did you get so wise?" "I've always been wise. You just weren't looking." She laughed. We both did. It felt good. Like release. Like healing. The stranger who took my hand at that wedding wasn't a romantic hero or a convenient plot device. It was me. I took my own hand. I pulled myself out from behind that pillar, out of the shadows where I'd been hidden my whole life. I spoke my truth, even when my voice shook. I fought for someone who'd hurt me because love isn't always convenient or easy or fair. And in doing so, I didn't just save my sister. I saved myself. Because here's what I learned. Revenge isn't about destruction. Real revenge, the kind that heals rather than harms, is about refusing to let someone else's cruelty define your worth. It's about standing up when standing up is hardest. It's about loving people enough to tell them the truth, even when they don't want to hear it. Marcus wanted to make me invisible. Claire wanted to hide me. For years, I'd cooperated with my own erasure, telling myself it was kindness, support, love. But sometimes the most radical thing you can do is refuse to disappear. Sometimes the most devastating revenge is simply being seen. 3 years later, I'm still that data analyst in a small apartment. I'm still not photogenic by society's standards. I'm still quiet and studious and more comfortable with spreadsheets than small talk. But I'm not invisible. Not anymore. Not to the people who matter. Not to myself. Claire sends me flowers on the anniversary of the wedding that wasn't, as we call it. Not as an apology. We're past that now. But as a celebration. Of truth, of courage, of the moment everything changed. I keep those flowers on my desk at work. When I look at them, I don't think about betrayal or hurt or the girl sitting behind the pillar. I think about the woman who stood up, who spoke, who refused to be hidden. I think about how the best revenge isn't making someone suffer. It's refusing to suffer in silence. And I think about how sometimes the person you most need to save looks back at you from the mirror. And all you have to do is take their hand. My name is Elizabeth, and I learned that the greatest act of revenge is living truthfully in a world that wants you to hide. Because when you step out from behind the pillar, when you choose yourself, your voice, your worth, you don't just change your own story, you change everyone's. Justice isn't always loud, but when it needs to be heard, it echoes forever.